Okay, we are getting down to the very pointy end of our event now, and I'm going to ask Mariana Gomez to turn on her camera and her microphone and make sure that she's ready to join us on screen. Mariana, it is always such a pleasure to speak with you. How are you today? Happy World Diabetes Day.
Renza, happy World Diabetes Day. It's always a pleasure to be here with the dedoc team, with you, of course, and all my Diabetes Day. I hope that your day has been as happy as mine has been so far.
It's been happy. It's been long. It is literally, it's been going now for about 20 hours. So Diabetes Day is a big day. It's a very big day. All right. So tell us what are you, we're speaking about insulin access, which, you know what, we should be talking about this every day. But again, what better day to showcase and highlight that today as, you know, as World Diabetes Day. So let's start. I'm going to get you to start us off, and then we'll have a bit of a chat about it.
Thank you. Of course. First, if you don't mind, I would like to introduce myself.
Yes,
for those of you who don't know me and who I've not had the pleasure to meet, my name is Mariana, and I'm Jorge's mother. And I joke around with the fact that I'm now Jorge's mother because there have been 2 times in my life where I felt like I've lost part of my identity. One of these times was back in 2006 when I became Jorge's mother, and now I'm being referred to as Jorge's mom. I'm not Mariana anymore. I'm just someone's mom. I've enjoyed every minute of it. I cannot complain. But the other time in my life where I felt I lost part of my identity was back in 1984, when I was simply named the girl who got diagnosed with type 1 diabetes in Mexico. And that was me. And that was me for a very long time. I was diagnosed in Mexico many years ago, as some of you know. In my country in the 80s, we had no access whatsoever to the internet and no access whatsoever to easy and reliable information on diabetes. There was no diabetes education in a formal way. There was no access to insulin analogs. There were no glucose meters. There were no healthcare providers who had the knowledge enough to identify the warning signs of type 1 diabetes. And yet there I was. My diagnosis was complicated enough. I fell into a coma and I was partially dead for a couple of minutes. My parents received the news that I probably wouldn't be alive, but it was mere luck or coincidence that someone was fast enough to recognize one of the warning signs, a fruity odor smell in my breath. My story, and I always try to share it as much as I can, is not unique in my country. It is very common. The uniqueness of my story is that I'm still here, and that's not the case for everyone in my country. And that brings me an additional layer of responsibilities when talking about access and when talking about advocacy and when working with different organizations and when volunteering. That's the reason why World Diabetes Day is perhaps one of the most tiring days for me, because of course, I feel like I have to use the privilege that life has brought me, the privilege of being born again, to give something back to my community. Now, speaking about advocacy particularly, I believe that my work has been around storytelling. You'll always hear me say things like, and where's that in Spanish? Because I feel like storytelling has always been something very natural for me. And I believe that stories and the narrative of people can shape the way that we live with certain life conditions, including type 1 diabetes. For me, being able to read and understand English was also a privilege because that opened many doors for me as I was able to read and understand what was going on in Australia, for example, what was happening in the United States. And I was very fast to translate that information for my peers. So advocacy at first for me was, as you mentioned earlier today, a very scary term. I would immediately reply that I was not an advocate because, of course, I'm not involved in politics whatsoever. And I was like, no, I'm not an advocate. But then I realized that just sharing stories and translating information for my peers was probably one of the things that I wish that I had received back when I was very young. Now, insulin access in Mexico is a topic that we've been discussing for many years now. In 2020, I believe it was, I wrote a piece with a couple of colleagues of mine, 41 International, where we were discussing the cost of insulin. Back then, in 2020, the cost of insulin was something around 700 and 800 Mexican pesos, which is something like $40 US. If you compare the pricing in Mexico of insulin to the pricing in the United States, you would immediately believe that it is very cheap. And it is confusing because people would assume that it is very easy to live with type 1 diabetes in Mexico, because of course, that is very cheap. However, There's something that needs to be considered. In Mexico, only 3 out of 10 Mexicans will have money enough to pay that price. It is still unavailable for pretty much everyone. Our state works in a way that even when there are guidelines for the management of type 1 diabetes, that of course include different types of insulins and glucose monitors, we will not receive them. There are social determinants of health that will even have an additional impact on the way that we access to our tools. Last time that I checked, and this information is back from 2020, last time that I checked, insulin price had rised a lot, and it was during one very big natural disaster that we recently had. We had a hurricane hitting one of the coasts in Mexico, and we decided to provide support to our peers. In these cases, as some of my peer advocates know, we cannot just wait and see what our governments will do. We have to act very fast. And it was the power of social media and the power of advocacy and the power of the community that helped us all gather all the resources necessary to help our peers in Guerrero in this case. So when it comes to insulin access, it is hard for me to say that we have not done enough. We have to do more research because we need statistics on type 1 diabetes in Mexico. We do not know how many people exactly there are with type 1 diabetes in a country like mine. Thankfully, we now have tools like the T1D index that will serve as amazing advocacy tools once we learn how to use them adequately. And we need to start doing more research. We need to find where our people are, how are they living, and the challenges that they're facing. Now that I live in the United States, of course, I wish I had more time. I wish I was less burnt because of diabetes and because life as it is, so that I could get more involved in understanding how the landscape analysis is and how the health system works. Because what I can see now here is that insulin pricing is just terribly absurd. I cannot understand this very complicated health system, but I can also see that my peers, people who look like me, who speak the language that I do, who speak Spanish in the United States, even when we're the largest minority, we are the ones who have probably less access to the tools for diabetes management that we need. So now I cannot just be a witness, I have to do better. So I guess that my point is, if we are advocating, I believe that we can learn from each other from the diabetes space, and we can acquire these tools, learning from other organizations, dedoc, T1 International, even Beyond Type 1, Mexican Diabetes Federation, Life for a Child. We can all build bridges together, and we can help train and advocate and form more advocates, because we really need them.
Yeah, absolutely. And your advocacy, Mariana, is just so important. And I'm always so grateful that that I get to hear about it, that we get to hear about it as part of the dedoc platform as well. Thank you so, so much. I know that, again, I found that really interesting what you were saying at the beginning, that, you feel your identity is taken because you're someone's mom and, whatever. And hey, that's a really cool thing to be. But my goodness, Mariana, you are very, very, very important. And everybody knows you in our community. So thank you so, so much for
being
here today. Enjoy the rest of World Diabetes Day.
Thank you for having me here.
Yeah, just so, so grateful that you've been here. Thank you so much.